Ursula Brasch, good evening. Thank you for joining again. Breakfast at Kuznach. Last time I was in your praxis close to the Black Forest. Now I am in lockdown in Berlin. You are in lockdown at the Black Forest. My first question for you is, how are you?
Thank you, Stefano, for this interview. Yes, I'm very fine. I must say I enjoyed this lockdown because it gave me some rest. It did not urge me to move, and I could take care for the things that were a long time waiting for me here. And so I really enjoyed to have this time and to have this space.
And how do you feel?
Family, I feel recovered, I must say. I feel recovered. I feel well centered. And I enjoyed to be so close with family. It was a very new experience and a very good one for everybody of us, I must say.
Germany is in partial lockdown.
Yeah.
The north of Germany, where I live in Berlin, has been little affected.
Mm-hmm.
How is the situation in your area?
Our area was quite more affected, but I must also say that we here in our surrounding around us, there is nobody ill. Nobody was in contact with the virus, so life was calm, and people were taking care for each other. Of course, you could see this. But since the weather was so wonderful, everybody was outside, going for walks, taking the distance, but with a kind of friendliness and tolerance, and also really taking care for each other, which was a good life to have in the last 2-3 weeks, beside of everything else, of course. Our actual life, our immediate life here was very calm and good.
When you and I were talking a couple of days ago about this interview, you touched 2 points, the Atman and the Atman, and the soul. What are those things? Perhaps even using a language that everyone can listen, because this series is being watched by many thousands of people right now. I'm astonished by this. And I want this conversation to be as easy as possible, not between colleagues, but between people that can reach actually the population that now is in anxiety, anger, angst, panic, and perhaps words can touch them and help them.
Okay, I try to put it in easy words. What I was thinking was, of course, this is very Jungian, that you ask yourself, what is the symbol of the whole situation? What is the symbolic situation you see now is happening now? Because it immediately started that virologists, people from natural sciences, are starting to give explanations, and this drove the whole understanding of the virus in a specific direction. In this direction, I want to talk with you maybe later again a bit more precisely. And it is what you said. It was about anxiety, about the virus, anxiety of like apocalyptic fantasies. Of course, it's a pandemia. And of course, it is a problem that very many people are dying. But there are many perspectives to understand it. And one of it is to see this virus and what the virus is doing in a symbolic way. So what is the virus doing? The virus is attacking the breath, the lungs. And in German, the word for breath is atmen. And atmen, taking a breath, is the first thing we do when we arrive in this world, and it's the last thing we do. So the atom and the breath is connecting us with the world beyond our body limits. The rest is within our limits, but with the breath, we are connected with the world. And without, we cannot participate. It's impossible. So the German word Atmen is coming from the Sanskrit Atman. And Atman is, the meaning of Atman is the breath of life, and is more connected with the undestroyable essence of life. And this is also the essence of mind, and the meaning of this is the soul. Yeah. So it is the question how we are related with us, but also with the world, how we are related with the soul, our soul, and the soul of the world. Yeah. And it's interesting enough because, as far as I know, I'm not a specialist, as far as what I understood was that the virus is not killing the nucleus of the cell, what is this, the cell? Yes, it's, I think, the cell. It is destroying this little, how do you call this, alveoli in the lungs. So, and again, it is not attacking the self, the core. It is attacking the way how we are related to the world, how we are in our relationships. And this seemed to be so interesting to me. We and our relationship to the world. And I think I don't have to repeat that this is a discussion, Friday for Future, in politics, the crisis of democracy, the economical consequences of globalism, all these things, that this was a problem already before.
I find it very interesting. These lungs, soul issue or link was mentioned by Susan Sontag in Metaphor as Illness, and I underlined it in a couple of interviews a couple of weeks ago. But this is also a matter of, when you talk about breathing, the lungs, the air we need outside, and the air goes inside and help us to oxygenate ourselves, is an exchange between the inside, the outside, we and the world. I always say this crisis is about the suspension of certainties and the move from a world and an external world and an inner world, an extroverted world and an introverted world. What can you say about this, Ursula?
Well, I want to refer to it also again in a very in images in a very symbolical way, because after all, what you also say, it is the question with all these crises, and it's always this question: what is the challenge of consciousness with that? Yeah. We are talking about the relatedness, our relationship with the world, and also with the relationship with ourselves. And interesting enough, so everybody knows, the virus started in China. And since we Jungians love a lot of fairy tales, I remembered there is a Chinese fairy tale that is quite parallel to a German fairy tale. And it is describing the relationship between a protagonist, a hero, so-called hero, and the world. And if you allow, I want to talk a little bit about these two fairy tales in order to explain what I mean, or what could be the archetypal background. Yeah?
Of course.
Also for me, it is to answer your question, how this is related with our experience of the world inside and outside. So the German fairy tale is the devil with the 3 golden hair. And to repeat it in short words, this fairy tale is about, there is a young man, and he's falling in love with the daughter of the king, and he wants to, and he's set to marry her, and finally he marries her. This is, I don't want to go too much into details. But one of the important plots of the fairy tale is that the king says, well, I cannot give you my daughter because he did some strategies to arrive where he arrived. Before I give you my daughter, you have to go to the devil, and there you have to take 3 golden hair. And the hero says, okay, I go. And he goes. And on his way, he has these 3 famous challenges. And these challenges are interesting because they concern the life of people in a village. Yeah. Once the water is concerned, the second time a tree is concerned, and the third time there is a man driving a ferry boat, and he has always to cross the river, always has to cross the river, and he can never stop. So these were the 3 challenges. And finally, the hero arrives at hell, in the hell, and he takes the 3 golden hair of the devil. And with this 3 golden hair, he can solve also the problems, the 3 challenges. And finally, he goes back and he can marry the princess. Yeah. So in general, we can say this whole fairy tale is the German fairy tale, is about going to the devil, going beyond limits, and solving at least the father complex. And while he's solving the father complex, also collective questions are solved. Now, the Chinese fairy tale, which is quite parallel, there the protagonist has the problem with his later mother-in-law. He wants to marry a girl, and the mother-in-law says, no. Yeah, it's not so easy to get my daughter. And she says, he asks him, he has to go to Buddha, and he's to take 3 golden hair from Buddha. And the same thing happens. The protagonist is going. He is going beyond the limits of the world. And on his journey, he has also 3 challenges. And there is one challenge, a challenge related with a big chicken. And it's interesting, this chicken is sitting on a tree. And this chicken is singing so beautiful in the night that all the people that live in this village have to get up and work up in the night and sleep during the day. So you see the normal rhythm of day and night are disturbed, but not because of a disturbance, because of the bird is singing so beautiful. Yeah. So because of something very, very beautiful, the natural balance is not in order. So this is the first thing where I thought, okay, this is very much connected with what happened before the Corona crisis, that we were, let's say, kind of suffering so many things, so many nice things we can do, and which need our effort, which needs our energy. It's somehow beautiful to travel, to have this and that, all the possibilities of the modern life, all these things. But on the other hand, it started to destroy our natural balance. And this is one challenge, you see, he has to solve. And the second one is also very interesting because it was about 2 phoenix birds that were always eating the harvest of another village. And the harvest was rice, but the rice was wonderful, big rice, fantastic rice. But since this phoenix couple is eating up all the rice, the people were starving of hunger. So you see, it's also something very collective. It is the richness of the Western world on the back of the poverty of the rest of the world. Yeah. So also you see something very interesting and collective. And finally, he comes also to a place where it is about a ferryman. There is another challenge, but it's also a ferryman asking him something. And at least he's going to Buddha. He's taking the 3 golden hair. He solves the challenges. And the interesting thing here is, and this is why I like this fairy tale so much, he also gets presents. He brings these presents back to his little village where he comes from. And one of the presents is that he gets the rice, which is a very, very strong and effective rice, but he's only allowed to eat 1 bowl per day. If you eat more, something will happen to you. And the same is that he brings the chicken, and that he has to say something to the chicken, and then the chicken is laying golden eggs, but also not too much, please. So he brings this back. He brings this back to his mother-in-law. Okay, this mother-in-law has to say, look, now, yes, okay, so I have to give you my daughter. So he marries the daughter, and he's then kind of a rich man. But since the mother-in-law is very greedy, she is doing some tricks to bring him out of the house, and then she's taking the rice and the eggs and is eating so much that she destroys the rice and she destroys the eggs, and she is exploding and dies. And then he is going to bury her, and after 1 year on her grave is coming an orange tree, an orange fruit. And 2 things are interesting here. One is that this fairy tale is about overcoming the mother complex. It's about being greedy, and it's about being that something so precious and important is not for your individual benefit, it is for the collective, because the orange tree, which is also related to the sun, is something collective for everybody. Yeah. So when we talk about this, the symbol of the virus and what is happening now, yeah, it is for me, what is the challenge? The challenge is going over the limit in order to find something outside of our personal limits. This is the breath, the Atman, with what we are connected, in order to find something new that we can integrate in our life in a new meaning of progress. And the question is, what is the solution here, and what is here the progress?
And the answer is?
Yeah, and the answer is for me, and I really must tell you, it's unfortunately not my idea. I read it. I found it when I read Erich Fromm. And what he wrote about that is 50 years old. It's unbelievable. He wrote it in 71. Because he was writing about the sibling complex. He said, since we have to overcome the mother complex and the father complex, and with mother and father complex means as long as we are in a wrong way attached to the father and to the mother, we suppress ourselves. Yeah. And for me, the father complex is, look what happens now. Everybody is crying for the state. Yeah, the state, as the father, has to solve all the problems. Good enough, I must really say, in Germany, this really works and is really supportive, of course. It helps, but it does not release yourself from finding your own ideas, develop your own new ideas to overcome the crisis. Yeah. Then the same thing is that people develop an anxiety. They need to be protected. They want to be that somebody is taking care for them. This is the call for the mother. Yeah. So of course this happens in a kind of good mothering. Of course this happens, but it's also the question when you depend on that, when you don't develop something mature out of this, then you're stuck in the call for I need to be provided, I need to be protected, and you start to depend on these people who seem to provide you with all that. And the solution for this is the sibling complex. It is to come to a relationship with your brothers and sisters. Because there you can have both. You can have a relationship, feeling family, feeling connected, feeling equal, not in a dependent way, in a suppressed way, not in a hierarchy. You are on one level, and on the other hand, you are free. And breath and atom is also very much related with the feeling to be free. Yeah. So this is, and when you see also in the both fairy tales, they bring back the solution, the solution for the collective problems, but then they establish a new relationship. Yes, the relationship between the protagonist and the woman he marries. Yeah. So for me, the whole question is how we can arrive to overcome these dependencies we have on the political structures, also on the economical structures, in order to be more related with each other, not in an egoistic way, but in a way where we share a good community.
But let me ask you a question, and I also ask you to come back to the center because you're going too much to the right with your seat.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Good. This is funny for those that listen, but it's important. You mentioned Erich Fromm. Erich Fromm in Escape from Freedom, when you think of the mother complex and the father complex, he said, when we are not able to sustain the responsibility coming from freedom, we give back this responsibility to the authoritarian figure, the authoritarian father. And these brought to wars. He was writing about this. Many commentators, many state presidents use the concept of war. The Pope used the concept of tempest. Before to ask you a question, are you happy, are you unhappy with the metaphor of war? I want to ask you another question. And the question is, what is going to happen in 2 weeks, in a month, in 6 months? Are we really able to hope for development, for change, or are we naive? Because I personally hope in a better world, in a modest world, in a world based on caring. But 12 years ago, we had a crisis, a financial crisis brought by the crack of the Lehman Brothers. Nothing improved. 75 years ago, the end of the World War, people were saying nothing will be the same after Auschwitz. How can be life after Auschwitz? Primo Levi. Well, the world on the one hand is improving technologically, but also is going its way. Somebody says that the world is out of joint. Shakespeare and Agnes Eller would suggest time is out of joint. So are we naive? Can we hope? Are we in war? Are we at war?
We are not in war. And what I said to you before, this war terminology, I don't like. It is a very, this is really a terminology working with anxiety. if we are naive or not is not important, because there is a constant change. It will change. The question is whether we can influence it or not. And since I'm a psychoanalyst, I always think with a new consciousness we can influence things in a good way. So there I'm very positive. Let me give you another example that was much more important, was much more important for me when I discovered it. In '87, there was Chernobyl. And to say something very personal, the catastrophe of Chernobyl was personally much more affecting and difficult for me than this crisis now. I tell you why. Because I was a young woman, I had a baby, my first boy, and I was pregnant with the second one. And at that time, nobody knew and could say what will happen, how much will we be concerned and affected about that. And of course, it was very concentrated in Europe. But the thing was that pregnant women were in high danger, and also the little children. So it was a wonderful time like now. I remember very much sitting in the apartment with my little boy, being pregnant and being strongly afraid. And there was, fortunately, the media were not so strong at that time. On the other hand, you were sitting there and there was really isolation. There was no internet. It was, of course, calling, but everybody was in a lockdown, in a very strong lockdown. I remember this very much. And it was about always asking the doctors if this could impact the children, and nobody could answer you. So you were, as a pregnant woman, in a fear what will happen to your baby. And everybody of us knows how strongly this influences the development of your baby. So personally for me, this was a much more deeper crisis than the crisis now. But one of the consequences of the crisis was, after 30 years, that we reduced the nuclear centers in Europe. And at least we are close to the French border. Now, after more than 30 years, they closed a nuclear center here in France, which is directly at the border, and which was all the time in the last years risking nuclear accidents. Small ones, but it was. So for me, it took some time, but something changed. It was also the development of the Green Party in Germany. So on a political, on an economical, also on a social level, something happened. So on one hand, I say, well, I'm optimistic. This will change something. And when I discuss it with these people, I see. But on the other hand, there's the psyche. And in the psyche, there's still a very strong movement always to regression, going back to the father and to the mother complex, going back to cry for the authorities and to give over the authority to the so-called strong person who is offering a solution. And of course, these political people, they like to use the terminology of the hero and the war, because, of course, if they find a solution later on, they can use it. Yeah. But the price we pay is that we stay immature, not part of all the necessary changes that have to come.
You are an expert on I Ching.
Yeah.
What does the I Ching have to say? Or what comes to your mind when you link I Ching and this crisis, the coronavirus crisis?
Yeah. Of course I did. And I was looking for the I Ching, and I was also asking the I Ching. And the hexagram that appeared was, and that seemed to be, for me, the most correlated with the crisis was 43, breaking through. And when I got it, I remembered that Helmut Wilhelm, which is a son of Richard Wilhelm and became a famous sinologist, he wrote about 43 breaking through. And his commentary on it was that he said breaking through requires totally clear, very conscious action on something unexpected that suddenly broke through in normal life. So breaking through is a kind of a psychotic situation. And in the commentaries, the hexagram is clearly speaking about something happened, something unexpected happened, and with all the conscious means, individually and also again in the group, it is necessary to overcome this very, very critical situation. Yeah. And there you see it. When I talked about that, we here in this area, we have the luck that people are managing very well. Also in Germany, things are going very well compared with Italy or with Spain. There is a much more greater catastrophe also now in America. So the I Ching is talking about that there's it's a kind of a collective disaster. But it has to be reacted on it with strict and clear and well planned means.
I want you to ask your last question now that you mentioned Italy and Spain. You know that I'm Italian. I'm linked to Spain very much. My wife is from there. Two of my daughters were born there. The third one is born in Berlin. So we are really a European family. The more I think about this crisis, this moment, is now a time of grief. Yeah. In Milan, there are more civil deaths than during the Second World War. In the past few weeks, when the lockdown started, many people, maybe everyone, got a bit manic, cooking bread, cooking amazing lunch and dinners, yoga, meditation, Netflix, and whatever. Mm-hmm. Now we don't know what to cook anymore. Now we don't know which book to read. And believe me, we in Germany are lucky that we are in a partial lockdown because my parents are in the flat where they live since almost 2 months. And it's getting out of control, but it's also about death. What is grief? What is depression because of grief? And what could be the next step? What can we say to those listening to us that are in deep sorrow?
Well, one of the connecting feelings is the feeling of love. And you see, what helps us is to really feel, and this is for me also expressed in the relatedness you can have when you have brothers and sisters, if it's going well, you know. It is really looking for each other and showing, even if we don't share one room with each other, but in our soul and in our feeling, we are there. When we are there with love. Yeah. Let me give an example. Under normal circumstances, when one of your daughters is going to Spain and you stay in Berlin, your daughter will never have the feeling because of this to be separated in the room, in the space, that you won't love her anymore. Yeah, because she's connected and she's in this love. And so for me to show what we share with each other, and that this has nothing to do with outer circumstances, whether there is um, a political change, an economical change, or the virus. Yeah. And to send these signs every day. Yeah. The mother of my partner, she lives in Italy. She's more than 90. She stays since weeks alone in her apartment. And the only thing we can do is we can send these signs and to reassure her that we feel really close and that we really take in an emotionally way care. But, Stefano, to be honest, this is not all. I think also this crisis shows everybody of us how we, and now it's again the breath, yeah, it's not only connecting with the world, it's also taking something from the world because we are processing this in our lungs. Yeah. So the question is, what is really giving me a kind of safety, emotional safety, kind of really value in my life? Yeah, beyond traveling and beyond shopping and beyond buying. So what is that gives me a very good feeling staying at home, seeing in which way I'm connected with my family. And of course, this is the problem that many families came into a crisis because it made obvious from what they were escaping. So again, it's also questioning myself. What is really important for me? What is counting in my life? And what do I have to correct to bring in a better balance? What do I have to finish? What do I have to reflect again? What do I have to discuss with me or with the others? So the inner process to reconnect with my values, also to face my anxiety, not to project it, to face my anxiety. This is also, I think, something that is that this crisis is requiring and is showing us.
I wonder whether this is a time for a renewed liberté, égalité, and as you said, fraternité.
Yes, it is. And it is really about honestly asking, what is this for me? Yeah, what does liberté? Yeah, what does freedom really mean to me? Yeah, and you see, of course, is it the freedom to travel to Spain, or is it the freedom in the way how I manage my family life, how I manage those things in my life that are really important. Yeah, and there I can make decisions.
In a recent interview, I mentioned a dream of a patient. She dreamt Stephen Hawking, who was a genius, but his body somehow dropped him, and he had to go inside. Today, thinking of freedom or maybe even liberation, I think of Nelson Mandela, who was trying to transform his country to end apartheid, and he was imprisoned because of his actions, and he resisted almost 30 years in a very small cell, smaller than this room where I am now, but he was free inside, and this was his strength. So those that in the US or New York are complaining because they need a haircut, they need a massage, they need new nails, this is really time to reflect on what we have become.
Yes, it is. And of course, when we think about Nelson Mandela, it's unbelievable what he did, what he survived. I don't know if yeah, who can this, yeah. But I was also thinking about that, and with a patient yesterday, we were discussing about there's a German folk song, and this folk song was written during the German Revolution. There was a revolution in 1848 in Germany, which led later on to the reforms of Bismarck and to many other developments in Germany. And this song starts with, "Our thoughts are free. And you can imprison me and put me in jail, but my thoughts are free. And I can think what I want." And this, I think, is something which is also important in this situation, that we start to find our own answers according to what we feel inside, and not to depend on Netflix and what somebody is saying about something. It's again about restarting a creativity of my own thoughts and also of my own feelings that I can have independent from where I am and in which circumstance I am. So maybe this is something that happened with Nelson Mandela. I don't know.
Thank you very much, Ursula. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, and I hope to see you soon. We don't know when.
Thank you for this interview, and thank you for asking so many people and collecting so many important opinions and show them to everybody. Thank you, Stefano.
Thank you.